You're listening to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and life and simplify them. And friends, I'm so excited because the times that I get to bring on my friends, my inner circle, onto the podcast are always days filled with joy. And this friend in particular is going to talk to us about making more money. Not just regular everyday money. We're talking big, happy money. And her name is Serena Hicks. Now, she teaches the concept of big, happy money to intentionally be inclusive change makers who really want to live their truest and most delicious lives, as she says. Her career started as a TV producer in New York and ended at a newspaper in Austin, Texas, after she realized that she wanted to live a great big life as a great big contributor to the world. She's earned a Daytime Emmy for her work, and oh, by the way, in the last 18 months has earned a little over $600,000 as a coach. So that's why we want to tap into this, learning about how and why she knows all about big, happy money making as a spiritual practice and a practical tool, and she is literally teaching all of us who are ready and willing to learn. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Serena Hicks. Hey, Serena.
Hi, Mary.
Hey.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. Hi, girl.
I'm happy to be here.
I'm so pleased you're here. And I was trying to think back, like, when did you and I first cross paths? I mean, It was a bazillion years ago.
Yeah, it was literally an epoch ago. And Ice Age, if you will. It was the early, I moved back to Austin, Texas in 2011. And I'm pretty confident that we crossed paths, if not in 2011 or 2012, because at the time I was baking out of my home.
Yes.
I was like, I want to do a bakery. And I certainly did not have money or access to loans because I sure did try. So I was baking out of my house and I got in some program for very small, like micro business, I think would be the new word. And you were speaking. And so actually it was an event, I was at the Hyatt overlooking Town Lake, which is so fun, forever in my memory. And it was about growing a business. And I, of course, related to you because I'd spent some time event planning when I was in New York. And I love, like, I think event planners are very magical creatures because there's a real sense of you've got to be hyper organized and you've got to be able to just flow and roll with every change that is guaranteed at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
So I loved listening to what you talked about. And it was just, that was it. And then we started following each other. And kids, this is before social media was everywhere. So it took the tiniest bit of effort to keep up, just the tiniest.
Yeah.
Just saying.
And, you know, it's amazing to see over the last 10 years. I know my business has certainly changed from event planning to coaching and keynote speaking and, of course, the podcast, too. And your businesses have changed and evolved over time as well. So I also remember at some point you had started and stopped a pole dancing studio, right?
Totally. Yes. Which is really funny because I'm like, it's fine. Everything that I currently teach is very similar. It was absolutely a pole dance studio. I did a Kickstarter campaign, raised $15,000. And for anyone who's confused, very, very few Kickstarter campaigns that raise over $2,000 actually get funded. Yeah. So I'm in a very happy, healthy minority there. And I was like, it's a spiritual pole dance studio because when I moved home to Austin, I'd been in New York City for 10 years. All of the pole dance studios here were either pole sport, which I have no problem with, but I'm like, I'm not into it for sportiness, or it was like exactly how to seduce your lover with a very choreographed routine. And I didn't like that either because the school I had learned from in New York City, which is what inspired what I ultimately opened in Austin, I really fancied myself more like a voice coach, meaning, you know, some people sexy is like Angelina Jolie super fierce. Some people sexy is Emma Stone. Yeah. Like this sweetness and this just warmth. And my point is, I'm like, sexy is whatever each individual human authentically deems is right for them. And so I like, you know, I had a heart on fire to help women at the time. I've learned. Now I'm like, anyone who wants to know, I'm in. But at the time, it was just those who identified as women. And the idea is just to reclaim their sexuality in a safe space, which is what we did. As in not to perform, if you can do that if you want, but for their ownership. And it was a really healing community. I also remember being hella exhausted because I did not know the principles that I now know and teach. Yes. So I was literally doing exactly everything. And I like remember being at Thai Fresh. So for those in the Austin area, I know Mary knows it is the best food, period, hard stop. Like Thai food, sure, but also gluten-free bakery and vegan ice cream. Like just go to Thai Fresh in Austin, Texas. And I remember getting a latte, and it was like 9 a.m. and it occurred to me like a bolt of lightning. I don't have to do this for 10 more years.
Yeah.
Like, I love my ladies, but I was driving Lyft and Uber just to make ends meet. My rent was almost always late. And it was this like, look, if I don't have access to loans, and I was hella single, it was just this like, I'm giving more than I have to give. I was in service. I loved teaching what I taught, but it was unsustainable. And I remember calling it.
Well, and that is so interesting that you should say that, because that thing brings me back to a conversation I had recently with Maria Davis on the podcast. And she was specifically talking about, creating wealth by sharing your gifts. And one of the key things that she said is that when you realize what your true, deep inner gifts are, your products and services can and will evolve. It's the gifts, the things that you are innately good at, deep down inside. When you get clear on that, then you start to figure out your offering is in the right capacity. And what I think you've always been good at, and you didn't pay me to say this, is I think you're really good at empowering women. And so that passion and that gift was in you when you were doing pole dancing. That, I dare say, was probably in you in the bakery and in the TV producing and all the things. But now you have shifted some things, and now you are doing big, happy money coaching. So wait, let's back up. Define big, happy money for people. That's as a starting point.
Yes. First of all, thank you. And secondly, hard yes. Big, happy money is it's not a number, because sometimes people are like, well, what is big, happy money? I'm like, well, 1 million to one person, their big happy money. Another person is 20 million. Another person is their first 100,000 in business. So it's not a number. It's a concept. It's a way of being. It's not a place you arrive at. It's how you choose to move through the world and how you choose to infuse your exchanges with exactly every vendor, including the electricity company, the clothes you wear, the food you buy, the people you hire, so on and so forth. So big happy money is not any particular number. It's a state of being. And the cheapest, easiest example I have, anyone who owns a Peloton bike and is obsessed with it understands that they didn't just buy a $2,000 bike when they bought their Peloton. They bought access to a community. They bought access to thousands of hours of workout programs. They bought access to Cody is my very favorite instructor. For any of your listeners who are with me on this, like XOXO Cody, I'm like, just being able to take a class with this man is worth $2,000. The fact that I get a bike and I get to take classes with him. So it's like, I thought I was just getting an exercise bike when I bought my Peloton. I didn't realize. I was like, sure, I'm happy for that. But then ever since I've invested in it, I'm like, this is so much more than an exercise bike. This has given me access to a community. This has given me access to coaching. Every coach in the Peloton universe will drop a truth bomb that'll blow your effing mind, So like, it's like a gift that keeps on giving. Another example is my grandmother is, in the twilight of her time on this planet. And she is, for everybody knows, my absolute favorite. We're very annoying in our family for these reasons. And she was in, basically she fell. So she was in a rehab center, and this was just when the vaccine started. So I ultimately spent big happy money. It was like $4,000 to fly up to Rhode Island, spend 3 weeks in an Airbnb, have my 10 days of mandatory stay in my Airbnb, and then get my COVID test, and then see my Grammy. And I spent most of my life being hella broke. So the idea of spending $4,000 to fly and stay in an Airbnb to mostly see my grandmother wasn't available to me. It genuinely wasn't available. And to me, that's some of the best money I've spent all calendar year, if not all decade. The moment that I got to wave to Grammy, who was in her place and her nurses brought her to the window before I was allowed to actually visit with her, everyone who loves a person, understands. And it's man, that was just money. And money cannot make you happy. Money can, however, provide all sorts of opportunities and can provide options for eudaimotic happiness. So we all know hedonistic, give me the chocolate, let's make out. I bought a new skirt. That's really fun and a part of a happy, healthy life. But the eudaimotic happiness is the connection, the being able to throw money at going to see Grammy at the 11th hour and I've got to spend 10 days quarantining and take these tests and sure, no problem. And I think of even My nephew recently posted something on Facebook, one of my nephews, about he and his girlfriend rescued a cat. And of course it came with like some stupid vet bill. And it's like, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you it did not give me great pleasure to throw a few $100s and be like, I'm proud of who you are.
Yeah.
Don't do this all the time. Please allow me to help with the vet bill.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the economic happiness that I'm like, you know what? Nobody told me, or maybe I just wasn't awake to it for a very long time in my life, but was like, no, money does not bring you happiness. It does allow you to be of even greater service. And not just by giving it away. I want your listeners, because sometimes, especially when I start working with women, they're like, yes, I want to make big, happy money so I can donate it all. I'm like, that is not my point, my friend. My point is, when you are well-resourced, you can be of greater service and be a resource. But if you just literally give it all away and refuse to hold it, that's not being well-resourced.
Yeah. Well, and what I hear in what you've just said, and again, thank you for sharing your story with your Grammy, because I feel like money is energy. That's all it is. It's just like the ocean. It flows in and it flows out. Yep. Money comes to me freely and easily is a mantra that I have had for, 20 plus years or so. Yeah. And I think when you think about money in those terms as just energy, it helps facilitate experiences that are deep and rich and beautiful in your life. And if you don't have a good source or flow of money coming in, it's very hard for it to go out,
yes.
To your family, your friends, to your business, to your coworkers, to your suppliers and vendors, all the things. The flow has to be there in and out. And where we get stuck is when it's not flowing in, right? Yep.
Or not flowing out. So I like to give the very elegant example. Everybody get excited for elegance. It's like eating and pooping. You gotta eat and you gotta poop. Yeah. If you stop pooping, that's not okay. Something's gone wrong. Exactly. Bad news bears. Not just uncomfortable, like something is wrong here, and it's not going to be fun. Likewise, if you stop eating, you can't poop. I mean, you will for days and days, but at some point, there's nothing else to move. And it's like, yes, being in the circle of abundance, just as you said, we take it in, we let it out, we eat and we poop. A healthy human creature, or any healthy animal, if you will, takes nourishment in, makes it something different, pushes it out, which actually contributes. So yes, and yes to what you just said.
I don't think anybody's ever equated money on the podcast to pooping.
Welcome, everybody.
I love it.
Eat and poop. Eat and poop. If I get hit by a bus, this is my legacy.
There it is.
Big happy money is just take it in and push it out. It's about being a good steward.
That's it.
And I love that when we talk about so many of my clients, when I start working with them, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but I have a bankruptcy on my record. That was me. And it's like when I decided I was a good steward of money, when I reframed that bankruptcy and stopped trying to beat myself down in shame every time I thought about it, but was like, well, I learned a lot. What do I want to do with these lessons? Do I want to make them useful? Do I want to help? Do I want to teach? Or do I want to just hide in my shame over here? And it was like, no, I want to help and I want to teach. And as I chose to see myself as a good steward of money, it became hella easier to sell my services because it wasn't just about, I want enough money to pay my bills. It felt less selfish and much more, it's less about me and more about the we. More about the we vote with our dollars. The more dollars I have, the more I will move it through the economy as opposed to sitting on a pile of it and hoarding it.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh, I think it's so interesting when I think about money as a concept, and we're doing a whole series this summer. We're interviewing people just like yourself. We're talking about money and wealth and just having open conversations, because I think for so many years, if not decades, if not generations, women in particular, we've been taught not to really talk about this in public forum. And even behind closed doors with our best girlfriends, no, we don't really talk about this. We put on a pretty shiny veneer that everything is fine, and then we crumble inside. And that I am done with. I don't know about you.
Burn it down.
I'm
with you on this.
Down.
Yeah. All the way down. Let's bonfire, and we're making s'mores.
Yeah.
Here is what you just said. So I want to underline it for all of your listeners. So lean in, y'all. Shit just got real. We, especially as women, and especially as women of color, I know if you're listening and don't see me, I'm half white and half black. I identify as a woman of color.
Yeah.
We were taught not to talk about money for the same reasons we were all taught not to talk about racism. you examine racism or talk about racism or say, hey, wait a minute, why is it we always do this? Or we don't do that? The system crumbles. Like racism requires denial to carry on.
Yeah.
And just in the last few years, it's like the more people started, effectively raising their hand being like, ooh, I'm not sure if I feel good about this. Where did this start from? Why is this our normal?
Yeah.
It's like once we start speaking up and actually just having conversations, it starts to like dissolve, dismantle, whatever word you want. It's the same with money. We, women and women of color in particular, were told like, that's a man thing. That's his job. So that we, if you will, would ultimately just, say thank you for whatever crumbs we got and ultimately stay beholden. And we have this option to be like, hi, new rules. And I ultimately think it's not just our right, it's our responsibility.
Yeah.
Because each of us stands on the shoulder of giants. Like, I have so many white women clients who are like, well, my great grandmother was racist. And I'm like, well, she was doing the best she could with what information she had. Like, we're going to let her rest in peace. We're not going to pretend that's a reason for anything other than like you to stay in your intentionally inclusive space, because whatever sacrifices she made, ultimately, I'm sure in her heart, she hoped that her future generations would have more options than her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so honor every sacrifice. Same thing for women of color. A lot of what's fun about being half white and half black is I see such diversity. But when I think of both of my lineages, it's like everyone sacrificed on so many levels. And so I have just decided in order to honor them, I would like to put the crown on my head. The one that I think there's a poet who says, your ancestors have bought and paid for the crown.
Yeah.
So it's like, put it on your head.
Well, and that's it. Yeah. And so we're going to have an honest conversation today, and I'm going to ask all the quote unquote dumb questions that I'm sure a lot of our listeners are thinking about right now as they're listening to us and going, yep. Yes, I'm down. Let's do this. Let's go for it. But where I want to start first is rewind the tape, the last 18 months of your own personal journey and your own business. Because previously to this, you were a social media marketing consultant, right?
Correct.
And so you were working time versus money and selling yourself that way. Yes. And you were feeling a little stuck, right? Tell us that story.
I mean, a little stuck and a little annoyed.
Yeah.
So it was literally, as you said, trading dollars for hours. Like, all right, you're going to pay me X amount of money. I did $10,000 for 3 months, and I put out X number of posts and checked in with the client once a week. And like, I even had someone in retail, so I'd like go to their store and take the pictures and do I was doing all of the stuff. And at some point I'd reconnected with a very dear friend who was also a coach, is also a coach. Her name is Melanie Childers.
Yes.
And she's phenomenal.
Yeah.
If you follow me, we cross-reference each other all the time. Like, she's great. So we were trading coaching. I was doing social media, teaching her, like coaching her on it, not doing hers. And then she was coaching me. So at some point, I started picking up on how she was coaching and sort of using that. And then I literally remember I talked to her this morning, fun fact, and I was like, oh, I'm by the picnic bench that I was like sitting on when she was like, why don't you just do coaching? Because what I got really frustrated that I noticed that ultimately informed Big Happy Money as a concept was I had all of these business owners who I would help them start making big money, and then they would start sabotaging.
How so?
Weird shit. So like one of the ladies was suddenly like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. Let's just hold for a week. Another lady's like, so keep in mind, the pictures I've been taking had been growing her actually retail business. And then suddenly she was obsessing over, don't put the prices in any of the pictures or quotes. And I'm like, yes, this is working. You're making more money. People want to know, oh, that's only $25. Let me call.
Right.
Or whatever. And it's like, I still see this in coaching, but in coaching I have consent, if you will. It's why they've hired me to call bullshit.
Yeah.
Where it's like, start doing something. It works. And then people, because their concept as being someone who has money or is a good steward of money, if that's not in place, then it's like, of course they want to burn it down or push it away. It's just self-sabotage.
Right.
And so that was when I was like, I just want to be a coach because I want to work with people who intentionally choose to grow their business. And if there's some self-sabotage or blind spots, they want me to point them out immediately.
Yeah.
Not like pretend. Right. I was just like, no, I want people who are all in, dedicated.
Yeah. And it sounded like the work that you were doing in social media marketing and consulting in particular is what I equate to like machine work. You're in the hamster wheel, you're just going. And sometimes you try to go faster, but you're still in the machine as a whole, right? It will never, you'll never get to the finish line.
It's a machine.
Right. It's bottom line.
You're right.
Machine work. And what I think is really interesting in what you said there. We spoke offline before this conversation about the idea that a lot of us, you and me included, we have our belief systems in a container. And then once we expand our belief system outside the container has to grow as well. Tell us more about what you mean by that.
So I talk about expansion all the time, and I'm going to use our lobster friend as an example, because when I found out this happened in nature, I was like, what the hell? So like nature's brilliant, you guys. So lobster suddenly wakes up one day and like Ms. Lobster, let's say, is like, this shell is too tight. So Ms. Lobster crawls out of the shell, has to hide, effectively crawl under a rock because is exposed and naked. So for anyone who feels that feeling when you're growing and you're like, I feel raw and naked. And then the new, what is it called? Exoskeleton shell forms. And fun fact, it's too big. So when lobster begins in this new shell, it is too big. Lobster then expands into this new shell until so many days later, Ms. Lobster finds that once again, the shell is too small. Repeat the whole thing. And that is what we do as entrepreneurs, as luminous leaders. It's like we grow, and I love how you said earlier, and we evolve, meaning like at some point you may look up and be like, oh, look, it's time for my next evolution. It doesn't mean anything's gone wrong. It means the growth is continuing. And yeah, so yeah, I love that you're like, it was a machine. I was like, it was a machine. I needed to expand.
Yeah. But then equally, the clients that you were working with, maybe the ones that were self-sabotaging and pushing on the brakes, were just not ready to expand, right? And there's the secret behind it, and this is what I've learned from you so far, is you have to decide. You have to decide that you are ready to expand, even if you don't see the next evolution of it all, right?
Yes.
That's the scary part.
They wanted to stay in struggle. And one of my, as far as I'm concerned, it is my legacy, it is my mission, it is a key component of Big Happy Money, is it's like, okay, we reject the struggle because the struggle was, created by the patriarchy. And the struggle keeps everyone, including, by the way, white men, in struggle. Yeah. Like, just so we're clear, I'm like, the patriarchy is not just mean to women and people of color. It's also mean to white men who are not allowed to have feelings and, are supposed to work together. And like, you just stay in this one job because that's your job. You don't get to follow your passions. So just so everyone is clear, when I say intentionally inclusive, I'm like, no, really, if you have a heartbeat and you're a human, I want a world where you feel safe and free to pursue, the calls on your heart. So yeah, I was like, this self-sabotaging stuff is mostly they just want to stay in struggle. It's too easy. Like the hardest part is letting it be easy. Yeah. And that is, as you said, outside of so many of our belief systems, because so many of us were taught you work hard to make money. When you start a business, you're just going to have to put in really long and hard hours. That's just how it goes. And, oh my God, like got to work twice as hard. I'm working when my competitors are sleeping. And it's like, guys, hey, nothing wrong with what got us here, but like, it's time to shift. Hustle culture is a lie. It's why people have heart attacks. It's also, we haven't touched on this yet, but my real glow up began when my older brother died of stage 4 cancer at 47 years old. And just so we're painfully clear, he worked himself to death. Yeah. He was an entrepreneur who was burning the candle at both ends for a couple of decades and forever talking about one day he was going to slow down. And 47 is far too young. And in my weeks of grieving and crying, I felt like, this may sound woo, but I am woo. Like, it felt like he passed the baton to me. And I just thought, like, two things. Number one, I want to be the human he used to see. Like, I was always sort of into my struggle and always like, guys, I did a thing, but look, I self-sabotage. Isn't that cute? Haha, help me. Like, that was just sort of my identity. Like, I'm the little sister. Woot, woot. And I was like, he always saw me as capable and like just about to hit my stride. Yeah. So I wanted to honor him by being who he used to see. And I also was like hard reject to this work so hard, stressed out, ultimately get diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and pass away 13 months later. Like,
It's heartbreaking. And
Yes.
you hear about those stories in circles of friends, and it's not that far away from a lot of us. We all have a friend or a friend of a friend who has gone through something like that or worse ourselves, you know?
Yes.
And I can put my hand up first to say, yes, I have certainly gone through seasons and bouts of burnout and you know, that's really stress and depression and just like, well, if I just work harder, then that will equate more money coming in. And that's not the case. You know, that's the big lie that we all face. And I think that also, not to put too much blame on the outer society, but I think that there is a piece at play of this kind of hustle culture and mentality that's being, you know, splayed everywhere on social media. And you only see the highlights reel of, you know, the fancy lifestyle and the 4-hour work week on a beach. And you don't see what pieces were put in place over time with that. And I think that this is, I'll be frank, this is where I think a lot of people struggle with the idea of making more money because they have also been fed the fear of there's no quick and fast way. You know, if anybody says that it can help you make quick and fast money, they are out to swindle you. What's your rebuttal to that?
My rebuttal is I highly recommend quick and fast money. Also, it takes as long as it takes. Yeah. So one of my favorite things is how often clients, and this I think in just the last 6 months or so, they hire me and they'd like make their money back. This started when I charged $10K for one-on-one. I no longer do one-on-one, but it happened at $15K, it happened at $20K, and now I have a group, and it just happened again, where before we even start working together, or as in the case of the group, 8 days after we started working together, she's made her money back. And the limiting belief is that we all have to work, grind. Yeah. And when you decide you are inherently worthy and your work is valuable and you decide to see the true and lasting value of your work, then being like, well, let me properly price and let me just find, guys, there's 8 billion people on the planet and so much money. Like Dubai still makes me giggle because it still makes me giggle. How much money is, that's just one city that I know of. Only one, my friends.
Totally. Yeah.
There's so much money and there's a client at every price point. So it's like all one has to do, which is audacious AF because it goes against, conventional wisdom, is be like, okay, here's what I'm going to charge. I'm going to find the client who this is right for them. I'm not going to try to convince someone when that's not right for them. I'm not going to tell someone, oh, no, you have to do this. Like, it's standing in our whole and complete fullness and sufficiency. And it's like, that is exactly why. Thank you for what you shared about, because me too, by the way. But like when there was the idea of like, I got to work harder because I have to make more money. That is the opposite energy of Big Happy Money, which is like, oh, you know what? I'm super not for everyone, but I'm just right for my clients. And my only job is to tell the world. I talk about lighthouse energy. Lighthouses, they just stand there and shine their light. They don't know how many boats go by. They don't know how many boats are like, oh, that's pretty. Who cares? Like they have one job, which is to shine their light to help guide some boats safely home.
And lighthouses don't compare themselves to the other lighthouses either, right?
No. And they're not also like, I'll bet someone else could do this. Like maybe. This is beautiful. Also, this is your job. Hold your position. Claim your place.
That's it.
So it's the like, it can't be quick and fast. I'm like, oh, I find it is all the time. The difference is it's coming from a place of it doesn't have to be fast.
Yeah.
It's coming from a place of sufficiency. It's like what we appreciate appreciates. When we decide that we are whole and complete, like how did I make a whole ton of money, big happy money, if you will? I decided I was whole and complete and worthy with a bankruptcy on my record while $80,000 in debt. And anyone who wanted to shame me, that was a them issue, not a me issue.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of making a bunch of money. I decided to own every inch of myself, including my debt, which I love it. So many clients are like, I'm fine with my debt in investments and business, but not the poor choices I made 4 years ago. That debt bothers me. And I'm like, this is like saying, I really love all of my stuff. I just hate my belly. It's like, so you don't love all of yourself. Good talk.
Right. And that's shame. Those are anchors that are holding you back either subconsciously or consciously that you have, and when I say you, I also me sometimes, is that we have integrated as part of our identity. And so again, I think that relates back to what you're talking about earlier. We believe our shell is this big. And so we play in that size of a container, if you will. So I want to dive deep into the how. So let's talk about proper pricing in particular. So how do you create space for big, happy money to flow to you and get your pricing right? Tell me more.
It's all literally black or white, abundance versus scarcity. For those who are like into litmus tests, it's like, what is the abundant answer to this question versus the scarce answer? I'll tie it back to anti-racism work and be like, when you think about how the idea of enslaving people like functioned, a scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
The idea that we can't pay a fair wage, so we're, quote, going to buy people and just, pay them nothing and force them. Like, this is why, guys, when I'm like, big happy money sets us all free. It's about liberation for everyone, for each person listening. And by the way, it's a practice. Like, I fancy myself like a yogi. It's like, when are you a yogi? The second you decide you're practicing yoga. You don't have to change clothes. You don't have to have a mat. You can just get on the floor and be like, this is yoga. I am practicing, and allow the evolution from there. So for like step one, how do you do proper pricing? You recognize that there's so much money and that money is an unlimited resource.
Yeah.
Of course, governments around the world are trying to manage it and whatnot because, best way to control people is keep them in fear. And a really convenient way to keep people in fear is keep them in scarcity of money. So when you choose to decide that the divine is your source for all, also, I know the Simplifiers is a bunch of CEOs and business owners and coaches. So when I say the divine is your source for all, your money does not always come just from clients.
Yeah.
I recently had a client who, in our 6 months of one-on-one, she only, if you will, she paid $10K, and most of my clients make their investment back. She only, in quotes, made $8K in client work. She made $280K in surprise windfall and a surprise inheritance and a surprise her husband was playing something online and invested, and 5 days later it was $35K cash. So like, we belly laugh. That is almost $300K USD. And her healthy human brain wants to be like, but I only made $8K with clients. But I'm like, but you manifested almost $300K, my queen. The divine saw fit for her to steward all of that money.
Yeah.
So like opening, almost like zooming out for the bigger picture view of like, okay, so there's a universe of money on the planet and the divine can create as much as divine chooses. Got it. Second, deciding that you will be a good steward of money. And part of that is like, if you are actually a service provider and you are in service to your clients, you need to be sustainable. You burning out does not serve them like you burning bright.
Exactly.
So instead of thinking over deliver, I've got to over everything, in which case you slide in hot and exhausted and maybe didn't sleep last night for the 10th time in a row, you come up with a price that's actually spacious because it serves them. And it's you burning bright when you are service providing for them, and spacious for them as well. If someone's like, oh, I super can't afford it, maybe you coach them on, because investment versus afford, like, what can we afford? It's my favorite. So many people are like, oh, I spent $200,000 on college. And I'm like, why does our culture decide that's a normal expense?
Right.
When investing in coaching, or even like I did an event recently, I paid for an event planner team. Some people are like, you could have done it on your own. First of all, I don't think I could have. And secondly, if I did, I would have been hella exhausted and less powerful for all of my clients.
Right. Showing
and
up on
my
stage.
Beloved.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
my beloved. So I'm like, no, I spent tens of thousands of dollars. That was worth it.
Yeah.
So coming from the abundant mindset, recognizing there's plenty of money, I like everyone to know there's a client at every price point. Also, there's a critic at every price point.
Yeah. And those are those are the tough ones, I think, because it's the same adage that we've heard a bazillion times over, but for some reason we can't really integrate it into our minds, is that, you could have 99 incredible reviews, but you focus on the one bad one, and the one bad one that says, oof, it wasn't that great, or oof, why does she keep selling in her Facebook feed? I just want to read about her pretty kids and her cute little dog. It's like you focus on the one and it's like, oh.
Yeah. No, we don't
Hold you
focus.
back.
I call this celeb vibes. I encourage all of my clients and listeners and friends, get in your celeb vibes. There is not one. So I love music. I mean, as we all do, and artists, but I'm like, there is not a musician. There is not a great leader. There's been no great spiritual leader that doesn't have a whole pile of haters and critics. So like, let's just respect that it's proof of life. Also, let's be clear. If you are not upsetting anyone anywhere, you are just winning the vanilla game which vanilla ice cream is not a problem. Let's not send hate mail anybody. But like, I'm here for the rocky road. I'm here for the sherbet. I'm here for the, like, you put birthday cake in it. Like, I'm here for the pizzazz.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, come on. We can't please everyone. So like, let's just liberate ourselves from the idea that, you know, getting negative feedback means necessarily we're doing something wrong. It's just something to consider. We can consider. Sometimes negative feedback is terribly valuable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
and
we
you
can
learn.
also just,
but then the things that you don't, that actually aren't productive and positive
Correct.
for you to refine, you have to surrender, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I take it as proof of life. And also for women and women of color, hi, we are sometimes punished for our audacity because other people, you know, it displeases them. It makes them feel perhaps small because they're not necessarily, you know, answering their sacred gift call. And like, we love them, but like, this is not for you to fix. This is not for me to fix. This is for us to love them from a distance, and you carry on doing your sacred work. Because again, I can think of no great spiritual leader, business leader, you know, whose audacity is not upsetting someone in their immediate family and or neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, and let's go back to pricing, because I feel like what you said there is very, very clear, and I think helps people when you elevate your pricing and instead of discounting your pricing significantly, because I have so fallen into that trap before where, you know, I've contracted small in certain seasons of my life, and I'm like, well, I'll just discount so that'll bring in some quick cash. And it's like, oh, it's tough. So it's the concept between attracting one whale or 10 minnows, right? Like it's all of that. It's the same effort, right?
Yes, it's the same. So we've talked about this, and I thank you for reminding me. It is, look, it is the same amount of logistical and emotional effort to expand into the concept of someone who catches whales. By the way, we don't eat whales, listeners.
Nope.
We
Vegetarian.
agree. Yes. Oh, Mary's vegetarian. I'm definitely a carnivore. We do not eat whales. So we're just making a metaphor.
Yes.
But like, if it's the same effort to capture a whale, which we don't do, versus 10 minnows or even 100 minnows that will only feed you for 1 or 2 nights, get the whale.
Yeah.
And another way that you say this, or that you reminded me, and I love to say, it's like in dating, when you are looking for a life partner, lowering your standards will not help anyone involved.
No.
You need, you need standards. We can't make them sky high, because that doesn't set anyone up for love and connection either. But like some form of healthy, somewhat aspirational standards in your life partner means you rise to the occasion and they do too. We do not lower our prices for the same reasons. We do not lower our standards when looking for a life partner. It does not serve anyone. Also, everyone tattoo this on your forearm. It has changed a life or 3. My pricing is not expensive. It is expansive. Your pricing is the first real indicator to your next clients what they get. It establishes trust, or it doesn't. It establishes that you take your craft, your business seriously, or you're sort of like, I don't know, I'm still learning, which I hear all the time and start screaming about. We're all learning on the job.
Yeah, it's true.
All of us. Anyone, male, female, any race, religion, like 10 years into your craft, you're even better. But we charge, that's why we raise our rates, as we are learning and as we are filtering out. So proper pricing is about finding a price that allows you to expand, your self-concept to expand, makes you sit up a little straighter, and also makes you like, oh, all right, I'm going to be taking this really seriously, and is sustainable. And what I hear all the time is like, well, I don't know if people will pay that. And I can assure you there is a client for every price point. Your job is to find them.
And equally, when you expand your rates, not only the confidence that comes to you when you sign on clients at that rate, but then you are able to pay your team a fair rate as well, because you can't do it all by yourself. You know, there's either a handful of virtual assistants underneath you or a support team that's working alongside you. I mean, they also deserve to be paid a fair rate. So it's a win-win, right?
Have to be. It's a key component, thank you for bringing that up, of Big Happy Money. Literally what you put into the universe is what you get. So I do occasionally have clients who are like, well, I'm not paying this person, I'm not paying that person. I'm like, well, of course you're not getting clients who are happy to pay your rate. You can't. It just doesn't work. It's literally law of universe.
So as you are a coach and signing on clients, part of your sales process is to book a discovery call with people. And I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast, they may be coaches, but they also might be wedding planners out there or photographers who also have the process of booking a discovery call and then, to feel things out. And that may be a sales call. It may just be asking lots of questions and discovering if it's a good fit and then moving them down the pipeline to becoming a client. So talk to me real quick about 3 top tips on converting more of your prospects into paying clients specifically on that discovery call.
So the first thing that I will say is, and as you know, I just started with a new mastermind group. So this is like brand new. Your people are hearing it here pretty much second. First was just last week. I'm now referring to them as an interview. Certainly for client facing, call it a discovery call, call it, a clarity call, whatever is fun and exciting. But as we talk about it back of house, it's an interview because not only are they deciding if they're hiring you, you're deciding if they're the right partner for you.
Yes.
Like, not great clients drain us. And remember, we don't want to burn out. We want to burn bright sustainably. So it is a double interview. And I think it is so much easier. I like to think of it like a surgeon. So I had a very wonderful surgeon fixed a wrist of mine, over 10 years ago. Okay. Here's what I delighted in. My surgeon had command. My surgeon wasn't like, oh shit, I've never seen. Actually, my surgeon was like, we never see this, by the way. So actually he did say that, but it was like, yeah, I got this. There was such a commanding, I like to say calm is commanding. So as the service provider, let's get in our calm energy.
Yes.
Think of yourself as a fighter pilot, a surgeon, whatever you want to think of. But I know I was pleased to find a surgeon who's like, yeah, dude, I got this. Not like, I don't know, I've never done this before. I'm going to do it for cheap because it's new for me. If my surgeon had said that, I would have run away screaming.
Yeah, that's not what you want.
And immediately, right? Like the surgeon was like, I'm going to discount this because I've literally not seen this in 20 years. I would have been like, cool, goodbye. Yeah. So we want to, number 1, think of it as an interview because that's what it is.
Yep.
Number 2, it's so easy. Here's my 3 Bs, you guys. Bond upon arrival in your session, whether it's Zoom or Skype or phone call, just bond, just connect energetically as humans.
Yep.
So often I've actually experienced that too, where it's like the service provider comes in hot and is like 10 seconds later. And I'm like, we literally aren't even energetically connected yet.
Right.
Let's just regard each other.
Yeah.
Let's just take a second.
Yeah.
How's the weather? Do you have kids? I have animals. Let's just connect.
Yes.
So just bond as number 1. And it doesn't need to take 20 minutes in case people are like, how long? Just take 3 minutes to connect. Bond. Next, believe in what you offer. If not, do your work. Write down the 10 different ways that your service is going to save them 10x over the next year or 10 years. Like, sometimes people are like, I don't believe in my stuff. Well, that is your job to work on. Like, if you're a coach, if you help someone get results faster or just having more fun, you have saved them or helped them make, my thought is all of my clients, all I do, y'all, is help them completely shift the entire trajectory of their earning potential for the rest of their life.
No biggie.
Got a lot easier to sell coaching. Exactly. When people are like, 15,000, that's a lot. I'm like, that's a ton of money. Also, we're just talking about your earning potential for the rest of your life.
Yes.
So I felt, and let's also be clear, I paid $10,000 to my health coaches. To be terribly honest, I want to lose a few pounds in my human body, my choice. So I hire them. But my point is $10,000 is a ton of money. But they were like, we're not just teaching you how to lose weight once, we're teaching you how to lose it and keep it off. And most importantly, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
At which point I understood this is actually a business expense. I'm really just learning how to be even more comfortable being uncomfortable. So it's not like, oh, I paid $10,000 to lose weight. I'm like, I paid $10,000 for them to help me have even greater command of my brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're in the consult, you're just bonding and then you're believing in what you offer, the true lasting value. So listeners, write 10 different ways that hiring you is worth at least 10x what you're charging, your new big happy money price, by the way, over someone's lifetime. Much like college. College isn't confused. College knows that you pay for 2 to 4 years, but that what you learn lasts a lifetime.
Right.
They're not like, this is how many hours, this is the price. They're like, yeah, no, give us this amount of money and you get to keep your education forever. Same. Also believe in the client's ability to see what you offer. When we're coming from our fears, which I certainly started, that's normal. Listeners, oh no, is someone going to see it? But sit up straighter and like believe that your client is smart AF and they know it's why they booked a consult.
Yeah.
Believe they want to say yes.
Yeah.
Here is my true, deep belief that took me far too many hours to figure out. If someone shows up for the consult/interview, they want to say yes. I don't care if they show up telling you they don't have any money. I don't care if they show up telling you, I think I'm already hiring someone else. My thought is, if you walk in this virtual house, if you will, it's because you want to be seduced/sold to. Like the client is coming wanting to see what's possible for them.
They just need a nudge over to show them like, hey, this next container is really good and you will fit into it and you will expand bigger than it. All the things, right? Sometimes you just need that little nudge. It's going to be good.
And every time I fail to do that for a client, ultimately in hindsight, I'm like, I have done a disservice.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as a shame opportunity, but I especially now that I'm a couple years into like actual service providing, I can think of different times I didn't like chase someone or, and I shouldn't say chase, but where it's just like one of my first friends when I started coaching was like, I'm going to hire you after I save up. And now I'm like, man, she'd be rich if I'd explained to her. But if you knew how to make the money already, you would have done that already. Yeah. So why don't you prioritize learning how to do this and not tell me you're going to save up to do it?
Right. And it makes me think of JJ Peterson from StoryBrand. I talked to him a few weeks back. And, you are the guide. You are not the hero. Yes. They are the hero. You're the Yoda to the Luke Skywalkers out in the world, right? And so in that, sometimes having been the Yoda for many people, and also equally having been the Luke Skywalker desperately trying to make the next leap and not seeing where I'm headed next, you need the guide to say, I got you. I see what's possible for you. And even if you can't see it right now, I see it for you. So come on, let's go. Right?
That. So we're believing in them, and you just nailed the last part, believing for them.
Yeah.
Meaning they rarely is a client 100% crystal clear and sold. We're believing for them. We hold that vision. That is part of what they are hiring us for. This is true for coaches. This is also all service providers.
Really?
If you're a graphic designer, you're believing for them. Of course, we're going to find exactly the design that you most love. Mm-hmm. LFG.
Yeah, totally. So how do you feel as we wrap up here, that big happy money, once you have it and it's starting to flow in, and equally that you are a good steward of it going out as well, how do you feel like it simplifies everything in your mind?
Because it's just that simple. I don't spend a penny on anything I don't love. And also I manage my mind. So sometimes people are like, well, I don't love having to pay, my mortgage, or I don't love having to pay the lawnmower. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You don't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
So this is the part where you get to get right and get clear that you don't have to do anything. So anything you're paying for, you get to decide is an investment that you have chosen for your future self's comfort.
Right.
So it's like radical responsibility, because I used to be that, like all the time, like, I hate paying for my internet and cable's so expensive. And then it's like, you know what I love? TV. I enjoy paying for cable. Thank you, Bravo.
Right.
Do you know what I love? Having a roof over my head. Yeah. Also, just everything, it's just an opportunity to reframe everything and not resist feelings or facts. I'm not here to bypass feelings, but reframe everything into, this is happening for me, not to me. That's a belief I have about all of my past debt, my past bankruptcy. And again, even credit, even when people are like, but I hate this one piece of credit, I'm like, stop hating it. And it's like, big happy money is basically deciding that you're just going to smear a healthy dose of love all over every pain point you find.
Yeah.
That you will be a vessel for the divine to work through. Like understanding it's not about money. It's like money is just the lagging indicator of you putting your service into the world, of you having healthy boundaries, which sometimes means saying no. Like it's not just give. It's like big happy money requires that you have a cup, if you will, that is like cup runneth over.
Yeah.
And so it's like step 1, you're filling your cup. Step 2, you're deciding your cup and your worthiness are inherent. No one else's outside opinion of you should be ashamed of this or how dare you do that is acceptable. It's between you and the divine, and that you exist and are alive means you are inherently worthy of love and respect. And then you will do your best to smear that all out in the world. From there, also mistakes will be made, and you're still going to love yourself up. and then try to smear that love out in the world. Like, basically, welcome to the congregation. We're just going to try to change the whole world with love. Money is a lagging indicator of when we're nailing it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I when I hear in all of that is, really giving yourself permission to show up as your higher self as well. Because the reason we play small sometimes is we're like, I'm just going to stay over here and stabilize things and, kind of status quo. And then it's not scary. And then I won't get rejected. All of the things that those stories and anchors that come up that keep us in that little bitty container. I see the truth in that. And I've seen it in my life where money has flown easily and freely, and other times where money was like, it's just a little bit tight, and how my responses to those moments is everything in how it actually shows up the next day, or new opportunities fall into your lap, or people call you randomly out of nowhere, or collaborations happen, or equally you have confidence to put those bold asks out into the world and invite people in. That it's not just what comes to you, but what you put out into the world, right?
Radical responsibility from a place of radical love.
Totally.
Yes.
So if you're curious about this, I highly recommend connecting with Serena. Her website is serenahicks.com. All of the links and everything we talked about in this episode is in our show notes over at the simplifierspodcast.com. Now, you are going to be opening up your group mastermind again in October, is that right, of 2021?
Yes, enrolling at the very beginning of October, and then we will begin in January of 2022. So if anyone is like, I'm even remotely interested, get on my email list. Because we'll be talking about it in September. Enrollment is in October.
Brilliant. So, Serena, we have a few questions as we wrap up, and thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom today. These are questions I love to ask everybody, so I'm very curious to see what your take is on it. The first one is this. What is one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
I'm so inspired because it's all of it highlights everything I know and talk about in Big Happy Money, but he speaks so succinctly about science and the neuroscience that explains it. So Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm currently reading You Are the Placebo, but first I read Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. I highly recommend it to all of your listeners.
Oh, he is so genius. You will, your lobster brain and your shell will explode after reading Dr. Joe, because I just recently finished Becoming Supernatural by him as well. And it's just what? We're working on this plane of understanding? I mean, it's good stuff. Well, if you're curious about that book, it's in the show notes. So you guys can click through and check it out. Again, the simplifierspodcast.com. So tell me, who is one person in your network, somebody that you know personally, that you just feel is up to brilliant things? We could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast.
Shernique Veritas is a former client, current friend, amazing, phenomenal confidence coach. So she is a brilliant Black woman. She's also been an HR executive, and she has such a glorious personal story. And she's I can't say enough good things about her, but what I love is that she's niched into confidence coaching, because of course, when we are not feeling confident, we tend to hide in plain sight. And we tend not to start the business or grow the business or do the things that lead to the most delicious life. So I feel like she's just a phenomenal creature to follow on socials, because she's a little bit edgy and salty like her friend Serena. And she has just beautiful truth bombs and invitations. And I would recommend to everyone. Also, as of this moment, she doesn't have a website. So you're going to have to find Shernique Veritas on the Facebook or the Instagram. And when you do, you will be delighted. You're welcome.
Fabulous. We will link up her social media accounts into the show notes for people so you guys can check it out. I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
Oh my God, today I'm so grateful it's Friday, because literally I had so much fun. I had the event last week, but I'm still collecting myself. And I was like, all I'm doing today is talking to Mary. And then I'm working with one of my coaches. And then I have one peer coaching session. And I already told the boyfriend, I'm like, we are getting in the car and adventuring.
Yes.
I'm home early and we are leaving early. And I just want to be grateful, to be very honest. Sometimes just the weekend vibes, just the playful weekend, nowhere to be. Nothing to do, just recharge.
All the things, and that is it. I think that that's the secret to truly having a joy-filled life and business is equal measure of attention and focus goes to everything you do outside of work. And,
God, yes.
And equal measure goes into your work. And sometimes we get that pendulum way off and it gets stuck over on one side. Yep. And that's where things start to go out of whack, right?
Yep. If you want to make more money, like big happy money included, you've got to have more fun. That's the thing I've learned. And again and again. And I'm like, oh, right. Because when we get stuck, as you said, we're stuck and then we're in scarcity mindset because we're trying harder and we're white knuckling. And it's like, do you want to get unstuck? Go have some fun. Literally phone a friend, take a walk, find a fur baby to cuddle. Y'all, I'm the person on the walk trail who's like, puppy, to all the strangers who are like, who is this crazy 40-something-year-old woman? I'm like, can I pet your dog? But like, that's my real secret, guys. That's how I've made big happy money.
Yes.
I pet everybody's puppies and dogs with permission.
So again, our website, serenahicks.com, all the links in the show notes. I'm so grateful for your time today and for you to share all of this fabulousness. And so my last question is this. Someone somewhere is listening to you and I right now, and she is like, you know what? I am so done with the struggle bus. I am done with the nonsense in my life and all the other outside voices that are telling me to go get a job or stop doing this or why don't you blah, blah, blah. What's one thing you could whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her in this moment?
That is such a great question. I want her to get really still and quiet after a nice dance break or a walk or something that brings her home to her body. And I want her to listen to that small, still, encouraging, quiet voice of the divine and then to hold on to that no matter what.
Yeah.
I always knew I wanted to be a helper in a big capacity. I know I've always known that you're like, let me help you simplify. Like, we all know the call on our heart. And I just want her or them to know it comes from the divine. Your desire is your guide. And the hardest part is getting started. It only gets easier. And like pulling the sword from the proverbial stone is like just the beginning of the most technicolored adventure. It will not always be joy, but it will always be worth it.
Yeah. Just do the thing. Make a decision.
Do it, damn it.
Go.
Just do it.
Let's go.
Go, go, go. Start today. Start where you are with what you have today.
Big love to you, Serena.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.